Yo, how's it going everybody? Chadley here, and welcome back to another Wonderlands video. In today's video, I just wanted to give my takes and my suggestions on things that need to be improved upon between Borderlands 3 and Into Wonderlands. Because don't get me wrong, Borderlands 3 is my favorite Borderlands game by far, but there are definitely some areas that need to be improved upon to make sure Wonderlands is as successful as possible. And the best way to go about this is just continuing on this conversation. There are other creators in this community that have done similar type videos, and I just wanted to keep the conversation going, get more people talking about it, because Gearbox does listen to us, whether you want to believe it or not. And the more of us that talk about these changes that we want to see, the better chance we have of seeing a game that reflects what we want. So I highly encourage you guys to go over other suggestions that you have in the comments down below, but please just keep them respectful. So for this video, I'm going to mention 5 areas that need to be improved upon and my suggestions on how Gearbox can go about doing that. So let's go ahead and jump into the top 5 areas that Wonderlands needs to improve upon. So starting off with the first one, and that is the gear in the game outscaling the player level. So this was the case in Borderlands 2 with the OP system, and then also in Borderlands 3 once Mayhem 2.0 was introduced. And basically all this has done for both of these games has just created an absolute mess in terms of balance. If you guys remember when Mayhem 2.0 launched, there was really only about 3 weapons that you could use in endgame content. Everything else just did not do damage, and it took them forever to get a balance kind of in place for it. And still to this day, it's not really balanced. I think they've actually overdone all the different buffs and stuff in the game. We'll get to that a little bit later in the video. But this not only affects the gear in the game, this also affected the different skills in the game. So Moze, once 2.0 and like skill mayhem scaling was introduced, she just became an absolute beast, and anything splash related can just do all content in the game. It doesn't even matter. Moze is by far the strongest Vault Hunter that we've ever seen in a Borderlands game by a mile. And a lot of that is due to the different scalings that are in place because of the gear and everything outscaling the player. It really doesn't add anything either. Pretty much all it does is just add a bigger number and create a big balance mess. If you guys remember back in Mayhem 4 before Mayhem 2.0, all you guys had to do was just be max level, and all the gear was exactly the same. There was no mayhem level on the different weapons, and it made it much easier for Gearbox to balance. If you guys remember, towards the end of Mayhem 4, you could pretty much use whatever you want, and nothing was too crazy. There was definitely strong weapons, but nothing was absolutely insane, and nothing was just completely unusable. Also, there was no skills just completely carrying a character. So hopefully with Wonderlands, we just get to the max level, and that is the max level that the gear is going to be at. If they ever introduce level increases, that's perfectly fine. Just don't have the gear overscale the player. Now, the second change that needs to be implemented in terms of Wonderlands is the anointment system needs to be fixed. If you guys have seen the gameplay reveal trailer, it's pretty much guaranteed that we're going to get some sort of anointments or some similar system. In my trailer breakdown, you can see the different legendary weapons that drop have different size beams, just like anointed weapons and non-anointed weapons do in Borderlands 3. Whether you like it or not, anointment system is coming back, and to be honest, anointments are good, but the implementation of them is what kills it. Anointments need to be trade-offs or augments for like more damage or different viability in terms of your skills or different weapons, not just press a button for 200% more damage. I would love to see anointments like URAD, where you get bonus damage, but you no longer have a health gate, which is a huge thing in the Borderlands games. So you can die much easier, but you're in turn doing more damage. Or like I said, with the augments, like maybe your skill covers more of an area, like that meteor shower that we saw. Maybe there's going to be an anointment that makes it affect a 50% larger area or something along those lines. That way it's not completely necessary for a build, because right now in Borderlands 3, you need to have anointments and you need to have damage anointments. There's nothing else you can be using. Making anointments these trade-offs or just slight augments would provide much more build diversity and provide players with a much easier time farming, because they don't have to look for that specific anointment that needs to be on the weapon. Now moving on over to the third change. The third change is that Gearbox needs to be flexible with Wonderlands. So what I mean by this is with Borderlands 3, they tried a bunch of new things, and I absolutely love that they tried new systems and all sorts of things with 3. Some were a huge success, like the Malamon takedown, and then others did not really work out, like the Mayhem system. So when they try these different things and something doesn't work out, it clearly gets negative feedback from the community, be willing to rework it and move on, not keep doubling down on the same system. So for example, with Mayhem, in the original base game of Borderlands 3, we had Mayhem 3 as the highest Mayhem, and that was random modifiers that completely dictated how your build worked and how you played the game. I'd say an overwhelmingly vast majority of the community did not like this, so what they ended up doing was introducing Mayhem 4, and that was pretty much universally well received. I thought it was great. There were still some modifiers, but they really didn't dictate how you played. At the time, there was really only one modifier that you'd want to re-roll, and that was enemies shooting 2 projectiles. They just did so much damage. That was pretty much the only one that you wanted to avoid. Everything else was good to go. But what Mayhem 4 ended up being was kind of a placeholder while they reworked the Mayhem system, and they pretty much just doubled down on the original Mayhem system with Mayhem 2.0. They wanted all these crazy, wacky modifiers that ended up just completely dictating how you played, and nobody really enjoyed them. They didn't really add anything in terms of gameplay. The easy modifiers did help with some build diversity, like More Than Okay Boomer with grenade builds. You could do that kind of on any character, which was really cool. But as you moved up in the difficulty of modifiers, it really limited how you played and honestly just took away from the gameplay. Things like buddy systems, getting stuck in a wall, always making enemies invincible, or postmortems just killing you instantly all the time were things that were just really, really annoying and subtracted from the overall gameplay of Borderlands 3. So if Gearbox would have just stuck with Mayhem 4 and improving upon that instead of doubling down on the original Mayhem system with all these crazy modifiers, I think we would have been in a much better place with Borderlands 3. Pretty much any Borderlands 3 creator could show you a graph of when Mayhem 2.0 was introduced and the drastic fall off in engagement with Borderlands content, which is a direct correlation with pretty much how many people are playing a game at a time. So it really turned a lot of people off from the game. So the flexibility from Gearbox also goes with them having the willingness to keep trying new things. So takedowns, for example, Malamon Takedown was a huge success. So I guarantee you they immediately started working on Guardian Takedown, which came out about 6 or 7 months later. And unfortunately, Guardian Takedown wasn't very well received. It wasn't exactly what people wanted. Now, I personally wanted a takedown that kind of had the core mechanics of the Guardian Takedown, more like puzzle-esque sort of things, not just run and shoot things. But the execution of it just wasn't there. It ended up being a little bit too tedious. It was way too long, and it honestly wasn't really worth it to run. So I think what happened is they took that negative feedback from Guardian Takedown and decided to just kind of stop making the takedowns, which is really sad to see because I think what they would have learned from the Malon and Guardian Takedown together could have made for, honestly, the perfect takedown. They just need that willingness to keep trying those new things. So overall, if Gearbox is willing to be flexible, I think Wonderlands is going to be in a really good spot. Now, moving on to the fourth change that needs to be implemented into Wonderlands is going to revolve around the endgame difficulty. If I'm going to be brutally honest with you guys, Borderlands 3 is way too easy for hardcore players. And hardcore players will always be the longevity of a game. If you look at anybody who's still playing Borderlands 3 right now, they're a hardcore player. So the change that I'm going to be getting to in this point is not going to affect the average or casual player at all. This is only going to extend to the hardcore players. Because honestly, Borderlands is great for the casual and average player with all the different difficulty options of Mayhem and such, but it does not extend far enough for us hardcore players. And if gear is made too strong like it has in Borderlands 3, the change that I'm about to suggest will kind of counteract that and not really need as much of a balancing on the strong end of the spectrum. So what I suggest for Wonderlands is that they have some sort of infinite difficulty scaling. So if that system was implemented into Borderlands 3, it'd basically be an infinite Mayhem system where after Mayhem 10, the rewards and stuff like that would not change, but the difficulty would increase to whatever the player's desire is. So for those of us that want more of a difficulty, we can go ahead and just set it to that. And if we want to show off some crazy interaction with some build, we can show how high and how strong we can go into these difficulty options. It would also increase replayability because all of us hardcore players could go ahead and kind of compete and see who can get the furthest in this difficulty scaling. So Wonderlands just implementing any sort of infinite difficulty scaling system would be huge for everybody involved with Wonderlands. Now, onto the final thing that I really think Wonderlands needs to improve upon in the Borderlands series is a reason to play co-op. Whenever we have seen a Borderlands game being marketed, it's always advertised as a co-op game, and it definitely is if you guys want to play the story and such, but in terms of endgame content, there's really no reason to. I always found myself playing solo. It was always kind of just annoying to play Borderlands 3 in co-op, especially once they added the true takedown switches. It kind of negated the reason to play co-op at all. And I'm someone who absolutely loved the idea of true takedown switches. I think they're a fantastic idea. I just think they need to be improved upon slightly. And this is all assuming Wonderlands is going to have like dungeons or bosses that give you these switches. And I really hope Wonderlands does have these options. But I think the way that these switches could be improved upon would just be adding difficulty and not setting difficulty. So right now, what true takedown switches do is set the player count basically to 4 players, even if there's not 4 players in that game. What this does is increases the health pool of the enemies and also increases the amount of rewards you get. But what I would like to see these switches do is add players to the difficulty. So if you have 4 people playing together, it would basically set it to like 8 players or whatever difficulty they end up deciding, and the drop chances and rewards are set accordingly. This way, the solo only player still has the opportunity to get increased rewards and all of that, but it also incentivizes people in grouping up and playing together for even more rewards. Because any game that you end up playing with friends, you're going to end up playing that game way longer. Friends always make video gaming way more fun. So Wonderlands having a reason for you to join up in co-op would be huge for the overall gameplay. Yeah, guys, those are my top 5 things that I think Wonderlands needs to improve upon in the Borderlands franchise. Like I said at the start of the video, this is all just constructive criticism and a way to keep the conversation going, because any change that we can get into Wonderlands is going to be huge, and that all starts with us talking about it. Gearbox is always listening, so the more of us that are vocal and respectfully vocal, that is, the better chance we have of seeing just an amazing game. But like I said, let me know any other suggestions that you guys have in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this video and agreed with any of the suggestions, make sure you leave a thumbs up on the video to let me know. It really does help me out. Also, consider subscribing for more Wonderlands content when the game finally drops next spring. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya.